Once, there was a poor couple, and they gave birth to a boy. Now this boy had a caul over his head, it's a kind of membrane over his head, and that meant that this boy was destined to have good luck. In fact, it was foretold that on his 14th birthday, he would marry the princess. Well, the king heard about this. The king didn't like this. So the king got on his horse, and he rode to that poor couple. And he offered them much money for their child. Well, at first the couple was reticent about giving up their child, but then they thought about it for a while and said, well, he is a luck child, so all must go well with him, and they gave the baby to the king. The king placed the baby inside a wooden box, put it on his horse, and rode until he came to a rushing river, where he took the box and he threw it into the river, saying, so much for an unsuitable groom for my daughter. And he rode off. Well, if you know anything about wood, wood floats. And that box didn't sink, but floated down the river and came ashore right near where a miller happened to be. And he saw the box and he thought, maybe it's a treasure. And he went and pulled the box in, but when he opened it up and looked inside, he was amazed. Oh, look what has been brought to me. And he went and took it home to his wife and showed it to her. And from that day forth, they raised that son as if it were their own. Well, time went on, about 13 years and change, when the king happened to be riding through and stopped at the mill and was attended to by the boy. Well, the king was quite impressed with the boy, and he asked the farmer about the boy, if it was his son. He said, well, he is our son, but we got him in a very strange way. And he told him the tale about how he found the boy in the box. The king immediately realized who this boy was. And the king decided he had to do something about that. So he asked the miller if his son wouldn't mind carrying a message to the queen for a gold sovereign. Certainly, you're the king, sure. We will let him take a message to you. And he hastily wrote a note. When this boy arrives, have him killed immediately and buried before I get back. He folded it up, sealed it, and gave it to the boy. Now the boy went and started going towards the palace, but he got lost along the way. And it got dark, and it began to rain, and he looked ahead of him, and there was this cottage with a light on. So he went up to the cottage and knocked on the door, and an old woman answered the door and said, yes, may I help you? I carry a letter for the queen, but I'm lost and tired, and I need a place to stay, so if you don't mind, I will stay right here for the night. No, you can't stay here. This is the house of thieves. If they were to catch you here, they would kill you for sure. I don't care. I need a place to stay. And he walked in and found a bench and fell asleep. Well, it wasn't long before those thieves came home. As soon as they heard him snoring in the corner, they said, who is that? It's just a poor boy carrying a letter to the queen. I took pity on him and let him stay here. Well, we can't have him stay here. He knows too much. We will have to kill him. Before they could kill him, they grabbed the letter and opened it up and read it. And they, too, took pity on the boy. So they tore up the letter and wrote a different one in its place that said, when this boy arrives, have him married to the princess. And they folded it up and sealed it. And the next morning, they fed him and gave him the letter and showed him the way to the palace. And off he went. When he got to the palace, he handed the letter to the queen. The queen read the letter and did exactly what it said in the letter. And he was married to the princess right away. And things went well for a while until the king came home. Now the king came home and found out that the prophecy had been fulfilled. And he was furious. And he called the boy towards him and said, you think it's that easy? Before you can have your bride, you must go and get me 3 hairs from the head of the devil. I don't care. I'll do it, he said. And off he went. And he traveled on. He hadn't gone far when he came to the gates of a village that was watched by a guard. The guard stopped them and said, "Who are you and what do you know?" And the boy said, "Well, I know everything." "Oh yeah, you know everything? And tell me this. We have a tree in the middle of the town that used to have apples of pure gold. Now, there's nothing, not even leaves on the tree. Why is that so?" "I will tell you when I return," he said. And he continued on. As he journeyed a little further, he came to another village where there was a guard who stopped him and said, "Who are you and what do you know?" And he said, "Why, I know everything." "Well, if you know everything, answer me this. In our town there is a fountain, and that fountain used to flow with wine. Now it doesn't flow with anything, nothing, it's dry. Why is that so?" "I will tell you on my return." And he continued. Soon he came to a great lake, and he knew on the other side of that lake was where the devil resided. And there was a ferryman, and he got on the ferry, and the ferryman started poling him across to the other side. The ferryman asked him who he was and what he knew, and the boy responded, "Why, I know everything." "Oh yeah? If you know everything, then tell me this. Why must I go back and forth all the time? Is there any hope for my release?" "I will tell you when I return," said the boy. Well, he got to the other side, and he found the house where the devil resided. And he knocked on the door, and who should answer it but the devil's own grandmother.
"Yes, may I help you?"
"Oh, I'm here to get 3 hairs from the head of the devil to win back my bride."
"That's a noble cause. Maybe I can help you."
"And I have 3 other questions I need answered. There's a village that has a tree that used to have apples of pure gold, and now it has no apples or leaves at all. Why is that? There's another village that has a fountain that used to flow with wine. Now it doesn't flow with anything. Why is that? And your ferryman that goes back and forth and back and forth. Is there any way he can be released?"
"Those are very difficult questions," she said. "But if you listen carefully, I'm sure you can find the answers."
So saying, she turned him into an ant, and she placed the ant in the folds of her dress, and she went inside. Well, it wasn't long before the devil came home.
The devil came in. "No, I smell humans in here." "Oh, you always have humans up your nose. Probably something you had last week. Come here and have some supper." And the devil ate his supper, and
When he was finished, the grandma had him put his head on her lap, and she stroked his head until he fell asleep. No sooner had he fallen asleep than she plucked out the first hair from his head.
"No, woman! Why are you doing this?"
"I had a dream," she said. "It was a terrible dream."
"What was the dream?"
It was about this village we had that used to have a tree that had apples of pure gold, and now it has no apples at all. Why is that so?"
"Because there is a mouse gnawing at the roots of that tree. If you get rid of the mouse, the tree will blossom again. If you don't, the tree will die."
So saying, she calmed him down, and he put his head in her lap again, and she stroked his head until he fell asleep. It was then that she plucked the second hair from his head.
"Oh, woman, what are you doing that for?"
"Another dream. It was a bad dream."
"What was the dream this time?"
"I dreamed there was a village that had a fountain that used to flow with wine, but now it flows with nothing. Why could that be?"
"There is a toad that's blocking the spring that's feeding that. If you get rid of the toad, it'll flow with wine again. Now leave me alone, old woman, or I will beat you."
So she calmed him down again, and stroked his head, and he fell asleep. Well, no sooner had he fallen asleep than she grabbed the third from his head.
"No, woman, what is it?"
"Dreams, it was bad dreams."
"What's the dream this time?"
"Our ferryman that goes back and forth and back and forth. Is there any way he can be released?"
"All he has to do is place the pole into someone else's hand, and he is free, and they must take his place."
Well, she got the 3 answers. She calmed him down again and stroked him until he fell asleep. And he slept until the next day, when he got up and went off. When he was gone, she took the ant out from her dress and she turned it back into the boy and gave him the 3 hairs. He thanked her and promised her that he knew the answers that she had gotten for him. And he went off. Well, when he got onto the ferryman asked him, what was the answer to the question? He said, I will tell you when I get to the other side. Well, no sooner had he gotten to the other side and leaped off, he said, you just put the pole into someone else's hand, and you will be free. And he went on. He then came to the village with the fountain, and the guard asked him if he knew the answer, and he said, yes, there is a toad blocking the spring. If you get rid of the toad, it will flow again. And the order was given, the toad was gotten rid of, and wine began to flow out of the fountain. Well, the villagers were pleased, so they gave him as a reward 2 donkeys with barrels that were laden with gold. And he went on until he came to the next village, where the guard stopped him and asked him if he knew the answer. And he said, yes, the tree, there's a mouse gnawing at the roots. If you get rid of the mouse, the tree will blossom again. Well, the order was given. The tree began to bloom with apples of pure gold. Well, they were thrilled, they were pleased. They gave him two donkeys with barrels laden with gold. And he went on until he got back to the palace. And he walked up to the king and he said, here are 3 hairs from the head of the devil. But the king, thank you very much, but his eyes were not focused on the 3 hairs. His eyes were focused on the 4 donkeys that were in front of him with gold and barrels of gold. He said, tell me something, where did you get all that gold? And the boy said, well, there was this lake. And on the other side of the lake there was a beach that was covered with gold. Why, you could take as much as you want and no one would stop you. There's a ferryman there that will take you across. Well, the king, without even hesitating, jumped on his horse and he ran off till he got to the gate. And no sooner had he gotten to the lake, he jumped onto the ferry, that the ferryman put the pole in his hands. And he jumped off and was free. Now, as far as I know, no one has relieved the king. The king is still going back and forth on that lake. As for the luck child and his bride, they did an excellent job as king and queen, because all must go well for anyone with the courage enough to get 3 hairs from the head of the devil and conquer a kingdom. 3 hairs of the devil.